They once served in Hitler's most feared unit, the SS, the iron fist of the Nazi regime. After the war, many vanished into shadows, changed names, and built quiet lives. But beneath the ordinary faces of old men in cafes and retirement homes lies a truth the world rarely sees: the secret, conflicted, and often haunting lives of former SS soldiers. Chapter 1. The Vanishing Men. When the guns fell silent in May 1945, Europe stood in ruins. But among the millions of displaced civilians, prisoners, and soldiers lay a uniquely dangerous group: the surviving members of the Waffen-SS and the SS proper. Unlike regular Wehrmacht soldiers, these men bore a darker burden. They had sworn personal allegiance to Adolf Hitler, fought ruthlessly on battlefields from Stalingrad to Normandy, and in many cases participated directly or indirectly in atrocities that scarred the 20th century. For them, survival after the Third Reich was not just about food and shelter. It was about erasing an identity. With Allied forces launching the Nuremberg trials, many feared imprisonment or execution. Some were hunted, others quietly repatriated, and many simply blended into the chaos. Papers were forged, uniforms burned, and identities reinvented. A farmer who had once overseen a concentration camp barrack could present himself as a simple laborer. A soldier who guarded death marches might reappear as a refugee fleeing Soviet terror. South America became an infamous destination. Argentina under Juan Perón opened its doors, offering asylum and opportunity. Paraguay and Chile too became havens. Entire networks, later dubbed rat lines, smuggled SS men from Europe with the assistance of sympathetic clergy and right-wing sympathizers. These men didn't just disappear, they were transplanted into new lives, often raising families who never knew their fathers' pasts. But not all fled across oceans. Many remained in Germany, Austria, or neighboring countries, folding themselves into post-war society. Some took menial jobs, others rejoined professions as doctors, lawyers, or engineers. A surprising number even found employment within the very state apparatuses of the new West Germany: police, intelligence, bureaucracy. For decades, the line between justice and practicality blurred. The Cold War demanded stability, and sometimes a man's past was deliberately overlooked if his skills served the present. Behind closed doors, though, the shadow of their allegiance lingered. These men knew that if discovered, their lives could collapse. And so they lived carefully, quietly, their pasts buried under layers of silence. Chapter 2. The Burden of Silence. As decades passed, the former SS soldiers aged. By the 1960s and 70s, many were middle-aged men, raising families, attending church, and presenting themselves as ordinary citizens. For their children, the question of, "What did father do during the war?" often met with vague answers. "I was a soldier," "I worked in logistics," or "I served at the front." Rarely did the truth emerge. For some, silence was survival. Confessing the full extent of their service risked prosecution. Even if they had not directly committed crimes, mere membership in the SS carried stigma. The organization had been declared criminal at Nuremberg. To admit membership was to admit complicity. Thus, secrecy became second nature. But silence was not merely external, it was internal as well. Many wrestled privately with the weight of memory. Some felt no remorse, clinging to revisionist narratives that painted them as patriots rather than perpetrators. Others lived in gnawing guilt, haunted by visions of the dead, by the knowledge that they had stood on the wrong side of history. PTSD, though rarely named as such in their time, left marks. Nightmares, drinking, estrangement from loved ones. There were occasional cracks in the facade. Neighbors whispered about strange pasts. Journalists unearthed names. Trials occasionally erupted decades after the war, dragging elderly men into courtrooms, their youthful deeds replayed before the world. Families blindsided saw fathers and grandfathers unmasked not as benign patriarchs but as former SS men complicit in one of history's darkest chapters. The silence also shaped Germany's broader cultural memory. Post-war generations demanded answers. Students in the 1960s confronted their parents' generation with uncomfortable questions. Where were you? What did you know? Some fathers broke, admitting their roles in Hitler's war machine. Others doubled down, insisting on lies until death. Today, survivors often sit in nursing homes or quiet apartments, still holding back details. Some speak in memoirs or late interviews, attempting to rationalize their choices. Others go to the grave without a word, leaving descendants to piece together fragments from archives and whispers. Chapter 3. Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Shadows. The image of a former SS man is often tied to trial footage or sensationalist accounts of fugitives like Josef Mengele or Adolf Eichmann. But the truth for the vast majority was more mundane. Many became bus drivers, factory workers, mechanics, or small business owners. They coached football teams, joined bowling clubs, and helped rebuild shattered post-war communities. Outwardly, they were indistinguishable from any other citizen. Yet their past shaped subtle contours of their lives. Some avoided friendships, fearing discovery. Some clung to fellow veterans in secret associations, gatherings where war stories were retold with selective memory, bravery at the front, camaraderie in the trenches, but silence about massacres and deportations. These groups lobbied quietly for pensions and recognition, and for a time, West German politics tolerated them, balancing justice against social stability. In South America, the lives of former SS men unfolded in parallel. In Argentina, they became engineers, ranchers, or businessmen. Some even lived openly, their German accents and connections giving them status in expatriate communities. Yet there, too, shadows followed. Israeli intelligence hunted the most notorious, culminating in the capture of Adolf Eichmann in 1960. The raid sent shockwaves through those who thought they had escaped forever. It was proof that the past could catch up, even across oceans.
In Europe, the 1980s and 90s brought renewed efforts to prosecute aging war criminals. Men in their 70s and 80s found themselves dragged before judges, their frail bodies masking crimes committed in youth. Some were convicted, others acquitted, and many cases collapsed due to lack of evidence or the sheer passage of time. For their families, it was often a shocking rupture. The quiet grandfather who baked bread on Sundays or fixed cars in the driveway was suddenly infamous in headlines. But for every case that reached court, dozens more faded into obscurity. The reality is that most former SS men lived out full lives in anonymity, dying peacefully in their beds. Their pasts intact, but unspoken. Their neighbors might never have known. Their children might never have suspected. History's monsters, it turned out, did not always look monstrous in old age.
Chapter 4. The Final Reckoning. Today, the last generation of former SS soldiers is dwindling rapidly. Most are in their late 90s or have already passed away. With their deaths, their secrets vanish too. Yet the reckoning over their lives continues, not only in courts, but in memory, in history, and in the identities of their descendants. In Germany, grandchildren and great-grandchildren sift through archives searching for traces of truth. Some discover shocking revelations. A grandfather listed on a roster of camp guards, a great-uncle present at infamous massacres. For others, the past is murkier, names obscured by war and reinvention. The confrontation is often personal, an emotional negotiation between love for a family member and horror at their past. Culturally, the debate remains alive. Were these men purely perpetrators, or also products of their time, swept into machinery larger than themselves? Should their old age shield them from justice, or is accountability timeless? Courts have increasingly ruled the latter, pursuing even minor camp guards for complicity. But society at large grapples with shades of gray, particularly for those who claimed ignorance, or who were teenagers thrust into uniform in the war's dying years. The truth is uncomfortable. Many lived as good neighbors, loving fathers, and diligent workers, yet they carried within them a legacy of violence and complicity. They represent not only individual choices, but also a cautionary tale about obedience, ideology, and the thin line between ordinary life and extraordinary evil.
As the last SS veterans pass away, historians race to record testimonies. Prosecutors scramble to complete cases, and families quietly reconcile with painful discoveries. In a sense, the reckoning is less about punishing the old men themselves and more about ensuring memory. To forget would be to risk repetition. To confront is to anchor history firmly in collective conscience. And so, the hidden lives of former SS soldiers remind us of a haunting truth, that evil does not always end with the war, nor does it always wear a villain's face. Sometimes it lives on, quietly, in shadows, in silence, in the ordinariness of men who once served a monstrous cause.